So today we are going to spin up a DigitalOcean droplet and install WordPress on it. So I'm logged into my DigitalOcean account, and we'll go ahead and click on create droplets. I'm going to go with the latest version of Debian, and we'll just go with a basic shared CPU with a regular Intel with SSD. It's got 1 GB, 1 CPU, 25 GB of SSD disk, and 1000 GB of transfer. We don't want to add a block storage. I'm going to choose the region as San Francisco, data center 2. The benefit is that most of the IT companies are located in California, so having a droplet there speeds up your API latency and all those things. And you can select some additional options here like IPv6 networking, user data. I'm just going to enable monitoring for now because that allows us to collect CPU load and all that other data. For the authentication, I'm just going to go with a password for now. I'm going to type in a password and create. I'm going to give it a host name of demo. You can enable backups for this price. It's taken once every week and stays for 4 weeks. Create. And now just waiting for it to complete. So the droplet has been created, and if you just want to check what's happening, you can just click on console. And there you see the login prompt. I am going to close out the console, and we are just going to use the command line. So I'm going to open Windows Terminal. I'm on Windows 10 Insiders, but you can also use PuTTY for this. So I'm going to go ahead and use this IP address. On Debian, by default, it's going to be, the user is going to be root. So SSH root at the first time you connect, it's going to verify the fingerprint. Yes. So now that we are in, we're just going to go and do a sudo apt-get update and upgrade just to see if there are any updates pending. Yes. And now your droplet is ready to use. So in order to manage your droplet, it is highly recommended that you use a non-root account, but with the sudo privileges. So we're going to create a new user on this Debian install, and we are going to add a new sudo user. So the command to do that is add user, and I'm going to name it Melchior, and type in a password for the new user, verify. And the user is created. Now, second thing you want to do is you need to add this root. You need to add this user to the sudo group, and the command for that is user mod -a uppercase G, and the group is going to be sudo. And which user do we want to add? We want to add the user Melchior, and the user is added. So now we want to log in as the user and see if everything is okay and it is able to do other stuff and use the sudo privileges. So we do a sudo su, and we're logged in as Malkio, the new user we just created. We'll go into the home directory and we are going to do, let's see, sudo, and it's asking for a password. So we are able to use the sudo privileges on this user. So now we want to use the sudo user, but we don't want it to use to ask us for a password every time. So what you can do is you can edit the etc sudo file. Sudo, I'm going to use Vim as my default text editor. etc. And here we're going to type in no, passwd, exit out of it. So this time it did not ask us for a password, and that's how you enable sudo commands without having it to request as a password every time. I'm going to install the omyzsh shell for this user because it makes it a little easier to customize the shell prompt and also to access the history and all that stuff. So you can go ahead and search for omyzsh. This is the command you want to type down, but for this you need curl and some other utilities to be installed in advance. So let's go ahead and install that first. So I'll just go ahead and do a sudo apt-get install. We need curl, dbget, git. I'm also going to install htop while I'm at it, and of course it needs the zsh shell. Enter, yes. So that being installed, now we are going to install the actual omyzsh framework. Just going to clear out of it, and this is the command you need to type. It's going to ask you to change the default shell to zsh. Default is yes. It's going to ask a password to verify, and zsh is the default shell. We are going to add two extensions, two plugins basically to the omyzsh framework. The first one is zsh auto suggestions. So this is the command. You can again go to the GitHub page and copy this command from there. The second thing you need to do is install zsh completions. You just go to the GitHub page for zsh completions, copy the command from there and enter this here. And both the plugins have been installed, so we are just going to go ahead and enable it. Clear out. So the file that you need to edit is inside your home directory, and it's called .zshrc. And optionally you can change the theme here. Agnoster happens to be the most popular, and that's what I'm going to use for this, for the purposes of this demo. And here you see the plugins. So I'm going to add a space and type in zsh completions and zsh auto suggestions. Hit escape, write and exit. I'm just going to exit and exit, and going to change back to the user, login as the user again, just to verify that the shell changes have taken effect. And there you see you have the prompt. I'm just going to clear it out, so it allows you to, it automatically fills up the commands from your history and suggests you commands. So I just typed in ls-al, and if you type ls, then you can see that it is suggesting the parameters automatically. So that's how you install ZSH. So now we are going to install the LAMP server on the system, and the command for this thing is this. So what we are essentially going to do is sudo and apt-get install. We're going to install Apache and libapache to mod fcgid. Then of course we need MariaDB server, PHP, the PHP extension for MySQL, PHP extension MB string, zip, GD, and of course the package php-fpm, which is going to install the php-fpm service and all. Hit enter, enter. So all these services are installed, all these packages are installed. Now what we need to do is we need to enable these services. So for that we need to enable essentially 3 services: sudo systemctl Apache, php-fpm, and MariaDB. And then you can start these services. Start Apache. Now the next thing we want to do is secure the MySQL installation. For that, the command is sudo mysql secure installation. So it's going to ask enter the current root password. We don't have a root password set yet, so we want to set the root password. I'm going to put in a password here. Remove anonymous users, yes. Disallow root login remotely. So this means you will not be able to connect to this MariaDB server from an external server. You can only connect to only the locally installed services will be able to connect to the local MariaDB server. So yes. Remove test database, reload privileges, yes. We are just going to go ahead and create a file. We're just going to go ahead and see if we are able to access Apache. So this is the IP address of this droplet, and I hit this, and we have the Apache 2 Debian default page. And we are going to enable the configuration for PHP 7.3-fpm, and it's enabled. We're just going to reload Apache, copy, paste, but you need sudo here. To go to the beginning of the command line, you can just hit Ctrl A, and for the end you can go and hit Ctrl E to go to the end of the command line. So let's just test it out. First we are going to go ahead and create a PHP info file. So Apache hosts the files here, where www/html, and the index that you and the file index.html is the default Apache file on Debian, which is what you see here. So I'm going to create sudo vim p.php and now we can type in /p.php to see if everything is okay. So there you have it. It's using PHPFPM, and these are the modules that I installed. And just as a little cleanup, we are going to remove p.php because sometimes it reveals too much, because oftentimes it reveals too much information about your server configuration, and we are also going to remove index.html because we don't need it. And that's your LAMP server up and running. We are now going to install PHPMYADMIN, but I typically do not like to install it from the sources because there's quite some bit of configuration that is required. I instead modify the sources so that it also keeps the package updated. So what we're going to do is we're going to amend the sources.list file so that it can install it from the repository. So sudo, and we're going to edit etc apt sources.list. Right at the top, you're going to add a line. Now remember to disable this repository after you're done, because otherwise it will continue to install packages from the testing repository, which is not very stable, but it does give you some cutting-edge versions of the packages. So next thing you do is sudo apt get update, so it'll fetch the newer packages. And now you can do a sudo that's going to install a whole bunch of things here. So continue, yes. And it is asking if you want to configure PHPMyAdmin to automatically run inside with Apache, integrate with Apache or light HTTPD. So I'm just going to select Apache and hit OK. By the way, you can see that since we enabled the test repository, it's installed PHP 7.4 as well. So configure PHPMyAdmin with dbconfig-common, yes. And we're going to create a password for the PHPMyAdmin user. Now that being installed, you do actually want to have another user for database administration. So we are going to create a MySQL user for database administration. So the way you do is sudo mysql -user is going to be root. We are going to log in as a root user from the shell and create a new user. And we're logged in. Create user. I'm going to call it dbmgr at localhost identified by, I'm going to give it a password for now. I'm just going to give it a simple password like my password. Never use this one. Never use this kind of a password on a production system. We forgot the terminator. Okay, that's done. Now you also need to give all the privileges to the new database manager user you created, so that you can use that user to manage the databases. So the command for that is grant all on, there's a wildcard privilege, to and then you do a flush. Exit. And now you can go back to the droplet and type in PHPMYADMIN, and we can log in as the user dbmgr, and we can type in the password we just created. So that's done. Now by default you'll see this database over here, information schema, and if you don't want it, you can go to settings, features, and databases, and here you can put in hide databases. This would be hidden, and now it's gone. So that's how you install PHPMyAdmin on Debian from the repository. Now we're going to secure the Apache directories from where the public files are served. So for that reason, I'm going to create a new user, which is going to be a non-sudo user, and which will have access to these directories. So like we previously did, we're just going to do a sudo add user, and let's just call it web manager. Try to avoid typically common names like admin, webmaster, etc. So it's asking for a password. In a production environment, you never want to use a password. You instead want to use a SSH based authentication system. And we're going to add this user to the www-data group, because that's the one that is used by Apache by default. Sudo user mod -a capital G. The group is going to be www-data, and the user is going to be the one that we just created, WEB-MGR. Right. Clear out of this. Now we need to go ahead and get into where/www/html directory and see what the permissions are here. So right now this directory is owned by root, which is not what we want. We want this directory to be owned and writable and readable by the web user, which is www-data. So for that we are going to do a sudo chown. So essentially change the ownership. I do a recurring just in case if you already have directories inside it, and user and group is going to be www-data, and the directory is going to be the current directory. That being done, I also want to enable inheritable permissions for all the directories going forward in the future. So what I'm going to do is sudo chmod 2775 the current directory. And if you already have existing directories and files inside it, you would certainly want to do a sudo find in the current directory. What we want to do is we want to find directories and execute So this command essentially is going to find all the directories recursively, and it's going to apply these permissions to the directories. 775, 7 means writable by the users, the next 7 means writable by the group, and 5 means readable and executable by others. And for the files, what you need is 664. So this essentially means read and write permissions on the files. So instead of D, we type in F, which means for the type file. And that's it. So now nobody else can go into this directory and write anything other than the users which are part of the www-data group. If I try to touch something here, touch test.php, it's going to say service denied. But if I go ahead and sudo su web mgr ls-alias, if I do a touch as web manager user that we just created, and the file is there. I can edit this file. If you can create a file, most certainly you can edit it. I just wrote that file. I'm going to delete that file now because we don't need it. And that's how you secure the Apache web directories. So we're now going to install WordPress on this droplet we created. And right now I'm logged in as a SUDO user, but I need to log in as a user which is a part of www-data group. So I'm going to log in as a user that I've already created. And I'm going to switch to the directory where we want to install. So by default, it's supposed to be where/www/html. And here we are going to download WordPress. So we do a wget https oops, we need a dot there, gz. So there's the URL where you can always find the latest WordPress version. It's downloaded. We are going to extract it now. We're going to do a tar xvzf. So extract verbose, and the compression type is gz and f is file. So WordPress is extracted, but it happens to be in a subdirectory right now, so we need to bring it to the root. If you have multiple installations of WordPress, then you can obviously install it inside subdirectories and configure Apache to serve those WordPress installations from their own root, web root. So I'm going to get rid of this file, and I'm going to move all the files inside WordPress to the current directory. So move WordPress, all the files inside WordPress to the current directory, that is a dot. So as you can see, all the files and directories inside WordPress have been moved to the current directory, and we don't need this WordPress directory anymore, so we are going to remove it, rm-rf. In fact, you should at least verify if there is any file left inside WordPress like htxs or other stuff. So to install WordPress, you need to have a database in advance. So you can just go to new, or you can go to databases here, and I'm going to name the database WordPress. You can name it anything. And we're just going to go to the IP address for this droplet, which is here. Hit enter, and WordPress should pop up. Yes, it is asking us for database name, username. So if you have multiple databases and you have multiple database users, so you can put in the username here. We just have a single database user as of now, so we're just going to use that. But it is not recommended that you use a common database user for all the databases, because that is a security threat. And if one of the website gets infected, the infection can travel into other databases. run the install. Just going to call it Valkyrie demo. You can put in a username. Try to avoid admin usernames because they are pretty common and hackers actually try to access your website using those usernames. You can put in a password. Just remember not to forget it. You can put in an email address here, and since this is a website which is not yet launch ready, you can just discourage search engines from indexing this site and install WordPress. And then you log in. So the user was this and password was this, and you're logged in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to install CERTBOT so that we can also add SSL certificates to this thing. So I already have a domain pointed to this thing, but let's see. So on Debian, the command is sudo apt install. Apt is just a wraparound apt-get command, so you can use apt also. Hit enter. We are going to refresh the snap core next. Okay, there are no updates available, and now we are going to install the actual CERTBOT. And I'm also going to create a link to the CERTBOT application. So right now it is installed inside snap/bin CERTBOT, but I'm going to link it to user bin so that it is available from everywhere, and you just want to check if it is available. You can do sudo which it is accessible now. And the next command you need to run is sudo certbot so email address. It'll ask you for an email address. I'm going to enter this one for now. Terms of service, agree, yes. Do you want them to contact you for stuff? No. Account registered, please enter the domain name. So I have already pointed a domain to this droplet, and that droplet, the domain is demo.valkyrie.com. It's requesting a certificate, and it's automatically going to integrate the configuration with Apache because we passed the Apache flag. And once the certificate is installed, what you need to go ahead and do is you need to restart Apache. So what you're going to do is sudo service apache to restart. So now you can go to the domain using SSL, HTTPS. This should work. And yes, it loads fine, the certificate is fine, but the WordPress configuration needs to be pointed to ensure that WordPress actually loads on the new domain instead of the IP address. We're going to install WP CLI, which is a command line WordPress utility allowing you to manage WordPress installations and the WordPress databases from the command line. So the command for that is, this is the file that you need to get with curl. So curl is going to get this file and output it, save it basically. So the file is saved. We're going to do sudo chmod +x on this file we just downloaded. This is going to make the file executable. So you can do php. If the file is not executable, you can still test it with the php WP CLI. This way it will give you all the help commands, etc., and you can just do a queue to quit. So we've already made it executable, and we are going to move it to the bin directory so that all the users have access to it. We're going to move it as WP, so it'll be available as a WP command if you do a WP --info, and there it works. So what happens if you have a site but you want to move it to a new domain? So as you saw previously, this site was actually installed on this specific IP address 138.68.18.187, and when you reload this thing, WordPress is still not aware that it's running on a domain, so you need to update the WordPress database. And for that thing, we are going to use the WP CLI, and I'm going to run this command. It says WP search-replace. So we're going to do a search and replace in the database, and we're going to search for this IP address, which is within quotes. I'm going to replace it with the actual domain name again, which is within quotes, and we're going to do the search and replace in all tables. And initially we are just going to do a dry run, so it'll scan the database for the string, but it's not going to make any changes. And here it lists that it needs to make 9 replacements, and we run the same command without this parameter, and it is actually going to do the replacement. So now if you go back to the site and reload, it's actually going to load all the CSS and all that stuff.